everyone, I'm Devon Kirschmann and I lead the mid-market customer success team at Gong. When I first started at Gong, I was a customer success manager, and since then I've transitioned to a first-time manager role. So I have a unique perspective on Gong, given that I've leveraged it both as an IC and a first-time manager. Prior to Gong, I was an avid note taker and relied on a number of tools like Evernote, Salesforce, just my notepad, just to make sure that I captured every detail of a customer conversation. With Gong, I can rely on the facts versus what I've managed to capture via notes. So as a first-time manager, Gong has been instrumental in helping me get to know the CSMs on my team, understand different coaching opportunities because every person is different. And also it gives me visibility into what our customers are saying without requiring that I attend those calls. So for today, I'm going to show you some of the ways that I leverage Gong from the CS leadership perspective. I've picked a few priorities here, but just in summary, some of the priorities that I'm focused on and leverage Gong for include validating and flagging customer health, getting up to speed on account escalations, anticipating new customer volume for account assignments, and that's all under this deal intelligence bucket, which in general, I think people always think, well, it's just sales, but in reality, we can look at it as account intelligence, which is equally as important on the post-sale side. And then the other bucket is people intelligence. So whether it's tracking the adoption of new initiatives that we're running, or just finding areas of opportunity to coach the team, these are some of the primary ways that I leverage Gong. So first, we're going to focus on the deal intelligence bucket. So as a CS leader, there's always so many moving pieces in your day. You have to mix your role with internal projects, coaching, but also just staying on top of customer health. So I'm going to look at two specific use cases first. So that's validating and flagging customer health and getting up to speed on account escalations. And then we'll close out this bucket with looking at how I use Gong to anticipate new customer volume. So when it comes to just validating customer health, what I typically do, of course, I can always ask the CSM, but CSMs are busy in their day-to-day. We do leverage things like Gainsight, but sometimes the easiest way for me to just verify where we're at with the customer, whether it's an upcoming renewal or just in general, maybe we have a new strategic customer that I am checking in on. I first will just go through and look for the customer here. And in this case, I'm going to look at this company, Geffisim. And what this allows me to see here is all of the interactions that have happened with this account. So even without diving into this, I feel pretty good about our interaction. So the first top line here is our interaction. So this would be my team. And then the pink is the other party. So just by glancing here, I can see that we've been in pretty close contact. We've got a mix of phone calls and emails, which I feel good about. But if this is a strategic account, or maybe it's an upcoming renewal, there are some key indicators that will give me an idea of whether this is in a good place for the renewal. So what I can do is use this search bar here. So in this case, we always like to make sure that we're doing business reviews, especially as we approach the renewal, just so that they understand the ROI. So first, I'm going to look up business review. And then what this does is it goes back through all of the interactions here, and we're pulling out all of the places where business review came up. So just by looking here, I know that there was obviously a business review that happened. But in this case, I'm looking for the call. So I can just quickly toggle here, and that will surface the calls that took place. So here's the business review. And I know that this one occurred on July 30th, which was pretty recent. So from here, if this is all I'm looking for, I can feel pretty good about it and move on. But if I'm curious about, what was actually discussed in that business review, well, I don't actually have to dive in and listen to the call. I can just quickly look here, and we're pulling out all the areas where business review came up. But what I'm looking for is this. So I see that small talk, that's great. We build rapport. But I know that pricing came up. And I know that, about the prospect was talked about a lot as well, which probably gives a good indicator that we're asking about their business priorities, which is key for business reviews. So in this case, I also know that the renewal came up. So I know that we've talked to this account about the renewal. We did a business review. And then maybe I just want to look up in general what the renewal next steps are. So I know that it came up on the business review. So if I'm curious about where we're at, I know that we had that interaction, but now I can see the account status and I see that we've got a next call. This is our demo environment, so forgive this, but I can see that we've got a next step already scheduled. So without even having to talk to the CSM on this account, I know that we've had a business review, we've talked about the renewal, we're probably in a pretty good place. Now the other missing piece here is with any account, we obviously want to make sure that we're talking to the right people, because if Matt, my rep, is talking about the renewal to a very low level contact, that's not very secure for me. So outside of those, using the search bar to drill into a specific area, I can also use this engagement map where it shows who on the other side are we interacting with. So in this case, I can see that we are interacting with the sales enablement manager, which is great. That's typically our program manager role, primary points of contact. But maybe I just want to make sure that we actually have an exec stakeholder. So I can search here, and I'm going to start with just VP. So Vice President Global Sales, Vice President of Revenue, maybe any of these contacts, I'd love to see if we're talking to them. So now, let me go ahead and filter. I'm going to choose Elizabeth. And in this case, I'm not seeing that we've had a ton of interaction. So what that tells me is the next time I speak to Matt, I might ping him and say, hey, with this account, I recognize we've done a business review, we've discussed the renewal. Who's our stakeholder and are they involved? So again, in pinpointing this account, it looks pretty good, but in general, I see that we're missing a stakeholder contact, and that's a little concerning to me. So now I can bring this as a conversation point in my one-on-one with Matt. So this is sort of how I can get up to speed on an account quickly. Now, in this case, I also tend to use it to help me validate my forecast that I'm making for my manager, who's our VP of CS. So at the beginning of a quarter, we'll go through all of our accounts. We do use Gainsight, so that's a great indicator. But what I also leverage is Gong, because once I build my forecast, I just want to make sure that that's correct. So for example, with this one, we have talked about the renewal. We have executed a business review, but I'm a little concerned that we're not talking to power. So what I might do in this case is allow a little bit of a buffer, simply because I want to make sure that if for some reason it takes longer or we're not actually showing value to the stakeholder, that might result in somewhat of a downgrade, or we might need to start building a case there. So it's not like I use Gong as a total replacement. It's more that I layer it on top of things I'm already doing. So I'm using Gainsight to help build my forecast, and then I'm coming here and just spot checking, especially the risk accounts, just so I can really see what's going on, what's the play. So now another way to use this same page, so in addition to quickly just getting up to speed and really focusing in on what you need to see here, it's also great for escalations. So although we would love to never have them, it does sometimes happen where a customer may be unhappy, potentially there are some technical issues. So in that case, it's also helpful for me once a CSM escalates it to understand, okay, when did it come up and what's been our play since then? Typically, it's not just, okay, Devon, go handle it. It's typically that there's been some effort to turn it around. But maybe it just warrants either me stepping in or just a nice note just to sort of close it out. So if I'm trying to get up to speed on an account, again, I, of course, ask my team what's going on and love to get their context. But it's also really helpful to just come in here from an unbiased perspective as someone who hasn't been super involved in the account, and just get a feel for what was the timeline of events and what happened. And I don't have to look at every email. I don't have to look at every call. But maybe I'm just going to search for, concerned. So this for me is concerning. So there are some triggers here where I can look into it. Typically what happens is the CSM will tag me in a specific interaction where it came up. And in that case, I might just dig into the call itself. And actually this one is set to be recorded, but I might just dig into what was happened. So if it came up on an email, I might just quickly scan through and see, okay, what was done? Did we hop on a call with them? And then also look at the past. So if they complain about their experience, I might go back and just see, okay, did we have really great interaction throughout? Was it completely one-sided? Or like, were the interactions that we were having not as valuable to our customer? So all this brings, puts me in a good place to sort of jot down my learnings. And then when I talk to the CSM, we can sort of compare what they interpreted of the timeline of events versus what I can see from just an unbiased perspective. And it takes out the he said, she said, fuzzy gray area and really allows me to see what actually happened. And in some cases, we have had scenarios where maybe we didn't get buy-in from the customer, but it's a much stronger case to be able to bring this to maybe a stakeholder and say, here's where we think we fell off track in the customer journey. And here's what we'd love from you to be able to course correct moving forward. So sometimes it just helps to, explain who we've interacted with, what the timeline of events was. And then for me also just to get an outside perspective here. So just to recap, the flow of using the account timeline, again, if an account is escalated to you, if there's one that you're looking for in particular, you'll use the global search, type in the name, and then that will just bring you to this timeline here. The last thing is sometimes I use this, but if maybe you're just checking in on an account and you notice something seems off and you don't want to forget, you can also use the comment section to just tag someone. So for instance, I did this last week with one of my CSMs where I just wanted to make sure that we flagged this as a discussion point in our one-on-one. So I just quickly left a comment here and said, let's discuss in our one-on-one. That then gives them the heads up so that if maybe it's something that they forgot about or they're curious sort of what triggered this, they can actually go back and see exactly where you commented. So maybe it's this interaction in particular. And that also gives them a heads up so that they can come prepared to discuss what's going on with this account. And the third area under the deal intelligence bucket is being able to basically predict what deals are coming down the pipe so that I can plan out who they should go to on my team. So of course, before I used to use a Salesforce report, that would give me somewhat of an idea. But what I would find is, I would plan for X number of deals to be round robin with my team, when in reality, maybe only a handful would close, and then I'd have to redo it. So with the deals board, again, everyone I feel like by default is like, well, it's only great if you're in sales, but it's actually super helpful for me because not only do I have a board just predicting the upsells and renewals on my team, but I can leverage, this is our mid-market sales manager, and I can use this to see, okay, what are the open deals from his team that are expected to close this quarter? So in addition to looking at the Salesforce fields, that's super helpful, but also I can get an idea of, potentially the ones that will actually close based off of this interaction. So it gives me that additional context that I didn't have before. And then you can see that I can see the stage as well. So potentially if, everyone sometimes gets caught up in not moving the stages. So I can see if we've got a working agreement, what I'll typically do is say, okay, for these ones, I'm going to go ahead and plan, and based off the close date, of course, I'm going to plan to go ahead and assign those out. And then as we get closer, I'll just check this pretty much weekly or every few days, just to sort of see how many have dropped off, because this is also great for his team because they can say, ooh, you know what, this one I still have in validation. There's no way it's going to close in September. So this is super helpful, helps me plan out. I don't have to bug Brian, the manager. I don't have to bug the AEs. I would never do that. So this just helps get a really nice, clean list of things that will actually come down. So I'm not surprised. So that sort of wraps up the deal intelligence bucket. The next one that I want to focus on is people intelligence. With people intelligence, there's a few things here. So first is tracking the adoption of new initiatives. We do this quite a lot. So whether it's a new product that you're launching, maybe you do go through methodology training. We did Sandler a few months ago. So there's just so many things to do. What I'd recommend doing is first start with something that's top of mind. So when we say a new initiative, it could just be as simple as we change the way we talk about the product. So whether it's new messaging, you have a new product that you want to make sure that they're highlighting, or even, maybe you have an event coming up and you want to make sure that they're promoting it on customer calls. Any of those things we can do in Gong. So for us, this deals board that I just walked you through is a newer feature. And in fact, it's one of our stickier features that is really appealing to leadership. So it's really one that we wanted the team to focus on. So when we launched Deal Board, what we did, and I'll show you in just a minute, is we actually set it up as a tracker here. And for those that aren't familiar, I'll just give you a synopsis of what that is. A tracker is a set of keywords and phrases that we input on the back end, and then we're able to tag them across all calls, and it's retroactive, so very helpful. They can be changed too, so if you have one new feature in January, now that's not as relevant, you can always delete it and switch it out. So what we did here, we did a training for the team. Our product team did that training. They had all the collateral on it, the content. And even though we don't have necessarily a script, we did coach on how to sort of talk through the deal board feature. And then what we're doing as different managers, so myself and then my commercial counterpart and enterprise counterpart, what we did was we set up trackers, and then I would just narrow it down by my team here. And now I'm able to filter for all of my team's calls where we're bringing up deals board. Why is this important? Number one, yes, I can see when it's coming up and I get a little glimpse of how it was discussed. But over time, if my COO says, hey, how is the team starting to talk about this? Sometimes it's hard to just say that by looking here. You can say, yep, I think so. But it's really helpful to see this view we can actually see over time, we're increasing how much we're talking about this. So if I happen to see that, maybe we have this nice little spike here, and then maybe it drops. My action then as a manager is maybe to ping our enablement contact and say, hey, looks like, somehow it's falling off. So maybe I can get the perspective from the team, but maybe it also warrants let's maybe do another training opportunity. Or let's listen to some of these calls and see, maybe we're just not getting the right talk track. So this is one way. So just briefly seeing, number one, are they talking about it? Number two, it allows me to sort of just quickly, I can either read through or just click through and listen to it. And if I find, I'll just do that flow now. If I find that one of my reps has a really great talk track and just it goes really naturally, what I'll tend to do is flag it either via comment. So if I have another person on my team who's not doing so well with it, I can just simply tag them and say, listen here. And then Marie can come in and listen to Shayna's talk track. That's one way. Or another way is I can actually just add this to the library. So if we have a deal boards talk track folder in the CS folder, I can say, here's some good examples. So we all know what it's like when you're trying to give someone coaching, or you're saying, okay, here's some feedback on how it sounded. Here's what I think you can add to it. It's so much better to supplement that with a good example. So this is sort of the flow of, number one, honing in on this new initiative, and then also taking action on it. So you hear something great, you hear something that warrants a coaching opportunity, what do you do with it? So I would say this is typically the workflow that I have when we're initially rolling something out. Then when I feel like we've got the hang of it, what I'll do is just flip my use case. So now if I say, okay, great, we've mastered the talk track here. This is such an important feature for us. So now what I'd really like to know, instead of are they using it, is when they're not using it. So I'm going to say does not contain this tracker. So now, to be fair, we just launched this feature, but what I'm going to do now is save this search, and this will be deal board not discussed. And I'm going to have this sent to me weekly to start, maybe not daily, and save. So what happens now is that I'm going to get an email every week where my team did not talk about the call, or the deals board feature on the call. And what that does is it just surfaces some coaching opportunities. And it doesn't even need to be a big discussion. It could just be me sending them a note saying, hey, curious, why didn't deal board come up on this call? Or if I have time and I do want to listen to it, I can dig in and see maybe it just wasn't relevant. There are very few scenarios where it doesn't work for a customer. So it's mostly just to do that. You've rolled out the initiative, you're coaching to it. Now let's just make sure we continue that trajectory versus having it fall off. And also the other thing here is if this will only come up on a specific call, for example, with upfront contracts for Sandler, we were looking for that across all calls. In this case, maybe we're really only looking for deal board on certain types of calls. With CS, even though we're not tied to stages, you can still do that by just using the call title search here. So if I want to make sure this is on all, workshops, I can just type in that extra layer of filtering. So you can get really creative with this view. And then the last piece under people intelligence, we sort of went through what one of those workflows could look like with popping into the call, tagging another person on your team, or providing feedback directly. The other place that I go, there's two ways that I coach. The first is that I, leverage my alerts to surface calls to me. And that comes in an email. I can just click in, and then I have actual blocks on my calendar on Mondays and Fridays to go in and listen to calls. So the first way is that I decide what I want to be notified on. So for now, I'm focused on business reviews. So I've been having those sent to me each week. I'll pick a few of them and listen to those. The other way that I coach is I have my team submit calls to me. So you can see that in a few places. So first I'm going to go home, and you can see there are a few that I've marked listen later. So you can see this is from my business review alert. So now it's nice and queued up for me. So I don't have to go digging for those calls. I can just click listen later, and when I have time, I can go through. So you can see that there's calls that I mark listen later. That's my proactive side. And then this is showing a call where Sandra asked for my feedback. So I have them decide on a call once a week, whether it's a call that they think they did really well in, something that they struggled with on the call. They'll tag me or request feedback. And again, now I have it nice and queued up. I don't have to go digging for them. And then another way, so that helps me sort of on, I would say, my day-to-day or week-to-week coaching. One of our newest features has been so helpful as well, because I have 8 people on my team now, which is a lot. And I want to make sure that I'm giving fair feedback across the board, that I'm not being biased towards, while onboarding is very important, I want to make sure that I'm also continuing to up-level my tenured reps. So I can actually go into this activity tab here. Team tab. And we just launched this coaching board which is meant for frontline managers like myself. And what it does is it shows me all the people on my team and the feedback I've given. So you can see very clearly here, even though in my head, it may seem like, oh, I'm on top of it, I'm coaching on calls. When in reality, it seems like I've neglected 3 of my team members, and that I haven't given them feedback in a month. So what this tells me is, okay, of all my calls, whether I'm getting it proactively via my team, or if I'm getting it, proactively via my call alerts, or if they're requesting feedback from me, if I've got 15 calls there and I've got an hour or 2 on my calendar, this tells me, okay, maybe I'm going to prioritize Andrea, Julie, and Kendall because it's been a while since I gave them feedback. So this is really great for just making sure that you're really dripping that feedback across your team. And also, if you find that, hey, you know what, I never get any calls from Kendall, maybe it's worth just digging in and saying, let's review a call together. Maybe it's just they feel shy about it, which happens. So just something worth addressing with your team to say, hey, if they're not giving you or they're not requesting feedback, I wonder why, or maybe they're more comfortable just reviewing it together versus you just commenting on it. So always good to be cautious of that. Just to sort of summarize, we went through a lot today, and it does seem like a lot, but what I found is super helpful is you don't have to do all of those workflows or figure out, you've got 10 priorities, figure out how to do all of them in Gong. That's not the best way to think about this. I would say think of 1 or 2 things that you're really hyper-focused on now, and don't reinvent the wheel. You already know what your process is, what your flow looks like. We do use Salesforce, we do use Gainsight. So it's not a matter of saying, well, now I just have to use Gong. How do I do this? It's more like, how can you use Gong in tandem with those? So for me, on the coaching piece, it's making sure that I'm focused on one area of the customer journey, which is our business review. For me, business reviews. And then for initiatives, it's more like understanding, are we actually talking through a really sticky feature? And then what I'll do is just layer it onto what I'm already doing. So I'm already doing one-on-ones. Great. So maybe I'm going to review offline, or I'm going to choose to review them together in our one-on-ones. When it comes to, figuring out customer health, right? Like I have a number of tools that are helping me build my forecast, but I'm just using Gong to validate that, to say, okay, here's what the data is telling me. But based off what I see in Gong, do I need to add an extra cushion, or do we actually look like we're in a really great place? So those would be my two biggest takeaways, is just think about what's really important to you now, and then figure out the right workflow in Gong. And our CS team is there to help you. If you get stuck or you're not sure how to connect the dots, you can always reach out to them, and we're happy to help.